Hello, this is Dr. Jazayeri. This is my Corona update, part 10. Today's April 17th, Friday. I have a lot of stuff to talk about, so I have a list. If I hope you don't mind if I look at it. So, I looked at the amount of cases that were tested positive globally and the number of deaths. And the death rate has now slowly creeped up. It's, if you remember, it was between 4 and 5% globally. Now it's around 6.8%. I'm not too worried about that. I think, we're getting a surge in some other countries. So I think it's going to stabilize more, as we get more data. But all I can tell you is the death rate has to be less than this because there are a lot of people who are asymptomatic, and unfortunately there's no way to test everybody in every country. So that's the problem that we have. And epidemiologists also, we don't know the exact death rate. All I can tell you, if you're 39 or under, the death rate is about 0.2%. So as the CDC has said, this is mainly a disease of people who have medical issues or are older. There's been a lot of talk in the past few days about the origin of the virus now, which is kind of an interesting development. As you know, originally was thought that it came from a wet market. A wet market is basically a market that has animals that are alive or dead, and as you know, they're not very sanitary, and that was the concern that some of these exotic animals, Wuhan, where supposedly this pandemic started, had exotic animals mixed with non-exotic animals. But there was never any bats sold there. The theory is somehow the bat maybe went into an intermediate animal, which were thought to be the pangolin. The pangolin, to me, looks like a cross between an armadillo and an anteater. It's a cute animal. I'm sure you've seen pictures of it. And they use the scales for medicinal purposes, and the meat also is eaten. But again, there's some question whether that's what really happened. Now the theory is, according to some records that have come out from American diplomats that had visited these virology center in Wuhan, and they said that it wasn't really, that the staff wasn't very trained, and there was some concern at that time that there could be a potential of this, whatever they're doing, leaking out. And so, it seems like everybody is going towards that. They were doing research on these viruses, which, they should, because they have pandemics and they're in these markets. Nobody has said that this is man-made yet. Again, we don't, everybody agrees that the technology is very, very sophisticated to make a virus this specific. But it seems like that this virus now somehow leaked out of this lab and somehow, started this pandemic. And as we know, the Chinese government didn't report this for a few weeks, and so maybe the pandemic could have been an epidemic, It's hard to say in the hindsight, but obviously holding information when we're globally connected is not a good thing. So, who knows? But this is the new development, and we have to see what happens. Unfortunately, now President Trump now is withhold the funding to the WHO. I kind of talked to you about, a communist party is like a narcissistic individual. As you know, they do not take criticism well. You almost have to put a gun to their head to admit that they're ever wrong, and they always look for a way to get rid of the blame. So China, as you know, now has been trying to blame the United States that we started the virus. That's kind of like a 3-year-old doing something bad and just standing on the corner hoping nobody would pick it up. But, now President Trump was criticized for not, listening to what people, apparently he's been warned about this, and he said, I never got the memo. And now, probably out of frustration, now he's stopping funding on WHO, blaming them for not doing a good job, which is a mistake. I mean, I think everybody agrees. You know, I don't know what to tell you. We got a lot of issues besides the virus going on, but that's where we are. The other thing that came out, which I'm not surprised at all, the first time I saw this, you know, this came out from France, that they were using hydroxychloroquine, which is an antimalarial agent to treat COVID-19. To me, that didn't make sense. Now, I'm not an expert on pharmacology, but my wife, who's a clinical pharmacist, also, you know, said, well, I don't know, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And a lot of people jumped on it. President Trump said that this is a cure, blah, 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 blah. I even talked about some of the, you know, talked to you about this. We had some members in our American Society of Plastic Surgeons that they said, yeah, you know, the data looks good. I'm going to take this prophylactically. And this is a nasty drug which has a very potentially deadly side effect, which can cause your heart to go into what's called torsade de pointe. So now there's been a bunch of you know, small studies with these trials. None of them have showed that it's been effective. Surprise, the drug that seems to be the darling now, and the stock market has gone up. I think the name of the company is Galeate. Is remdesivir, which is an antiviral medication. I mean, it's a virus. So, you know, 2 + 2 is 4. So that kind of makes sense, you know. But again, we're a long way away from getting a vaccine. So that's, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on. Also, for those of you, again, I don't want to sound dark, but the truth is, and this is probably the truth, the CDC believes now that we could get another wave of this virus in the fall. That, you know, everybody seems to believe that this virus is going to stick around and become part of the flu kind of cocktail. And as you may or may not know, the seasonal flu, which we get every year, it does include some of the coronaviruses. So, you know, this is like the black sheep of the family. You know, it's a little bit more aggressive, and I guess the rest of the family just have to put up with it. But, so, you know, I don't know what's going to happen. Are we going to have to go into quarantine again? I hope not. You know, it's tough. It's tough to predict what's going to happen in fall. But that seems to be a reality. Hopefully we've had some herd immunity. The concept of herd immunity is, well, I mean, that's one way of treating this this virus, is to let everybody mingle, okay? And so you get this herd immunity, like, you know, this virus floats around, we get antibodies, the survivors now are immune, but you have a lot more deaths. I mean, that's a tough decision to make, you know. So I think most people said that given the way this virus is and blah, 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 that we should probably do the social isolation. But, you know, it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is, you know, I've been talking about this conspiracy theories, and some of you may know about this, some of you may not, and I should have done more research. If you remember, I think in my last video, that they were talking about this virus, you know, not originating and coming out of the lab, and then everybody had told me about this book by Dean Koontz. Remember I think it's called The Heart of Darkness? And everybody said, oh, you should read this. He talks about Wuhan, this thing called Wuhan 400, and he predicted that this virus is going to come out in 2020. Well, that's not completely accurate. If you really, and like I said, I said, you know, I didn't do my research on this, but I did some more research. The original book that Mr. Koontz wrote came out in 1981, And the virus is that at that time in that book was called Gorky, Gorki 400. If you remember, in 1981, we were at the height of the Cold War. Russia was the enemy, and so this virus originally came out of Russia, but it had 100% mortality, which is definitely not the case with this virus. This book then, books get reprinted as they run out of prints. They have to reprint them, maybe change things, change the cover, do some things. So the second reprint then came out in 1989, and if you remember, at that time, Gorbachev was the president of the Russian Republic. Perestroika was happening. If you remember, the Berlin Wall came down in 1991. So Russia at that point was not considered an enemy. It was becoming democratic. So they changed the virus to Wuhan 400 because now China was this communist threat, and China was on the rise. As you know, at that time they were trying to get businesses going. And in that book, he never talked about anything happening in 2020. There was a book written by an American psychic called Sylvia Browne, Browne, called End of Days, which came out, I believe, in 2008. And in that, there's a paragraph where she says in 2020 there's a pneumonia-like illness that comes. It vanishes rapidly, only to reemerge in 10 years. So that's also partially true because, as we know, this is not going to go away. So somehow these two, got together, and again, that's the problem we have with, social media and people just starting these rumors, and they spread like wildfire. So I just wanted to touch base on that. Be careful when you read things. That's all I want to say, and keep an open mind. So what, there's been a lot of changes. Obviously, none of these are ideal. But I always, there are some predictions on what will happen after this pandemic is resolved. And I always think we should look at some of the positive things that we can get out of a negative situation. So one of the predictions are that once people realize they can work from home and do the same thing, that they want to stay home. And that businesses are going to allow people to stay home. I think that's great, mainly because of pollution. The less cars we drive, the less pollution we have. So, and staying at home, you're comfortable, you don't have as much stress, you can do your things. I think that's a great thing. So what other things can we learn from this? As we know, I mentioned that the CDC has done a worldwide study, and 90% of the patients that have died from coronavirus have had issues, either diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, especially in the younger population. So this may be the time to, take care of ourselves. Unfortunately, the average American diet is, for lack of a better word, crap. A lot of frozen this, canned this, processed this, maybe a slice of tomato and lettuce in your fast food is the vegetables that we get. And we all know that that's just not good. So hopefully this will, if you're scared of dying, because you're doing a lot of stuff not to die, so why don't you start with the basics? These are cheap and easy to do. Okay, so your diet should have a lot of fruits and vegetables. If you either you eat them raw, or if you want to steam them, you steam them so they're still crunchy. You don't want them mush, because you're gonna get rid of all the vitamins. With a little bit of, if you want meat or dairy in there to get your calcium and protein. If you're gonna go vegan, you're just gonna make sure you get your iron and the vitamin B's and protein some other way. And there are ways to do that, but it's more difficult. And then the meat that you eat, can be, beef, poultry, pork, fish, obviously. But you want to either cook them or grill them. Do not fry them. One thing about fish, especially fatty fish like tuna, If you get them farm raised, I think Costco, I think they're farm raised. It says farm raised on a lot of them. So that's okay. But if you want to eat wild tuna, for example, that's gotten from the ocean, unfortunately, because of us, there's mercury in the water, and they get stored in the fat of this fish that are, taking all the water, and the mercury gets in there. There was an actress named Daphne Zuniga. Some of you will remember her. I think she was in Melrose Place, which was a very popular TV show in the 90s, I believe. Well, she used to eat, and actually she posted this. I'm not making this up. You can look it up. Daphne Zuniga, Zuniga. She loved sushi, and she would eat 3 or 4 times a day. And after a while, she developed memory loss, and everybody was baffled what was going on. They finally found out that she had mercury poisoning from eating all this fish. So if you want to eat wild, fatty fish, I would limit it to once a week, unfortunately, because of that. And then, exercise, just things. Dental hygiene. I mean, I see a lot of people with tartar sauce on their teeth. Why? There's a lot of data that poor oral hygiene, you're constantly shedding bacteria into your bloodstream. This bacteria goes into your heart, and your body, wants to fight this bacteria and causes an inflammatory response. And it will definitely increase your risk of heart disease. So all you have to do is, a few minutes a day, floss and brush, and then just brush in the morning because you've already flossed at night. And if your insurance pays for twice a year dental cleaning, great. But a lot of people are not saying if you do proper oral hygiene, you can probably go once a year if money is an issue for you. And then I recommend that you take a shower every day. I know some people don't do that. They may take a shower once a week. But remember, we have all this pollution, not only the bacteria and all this pollution that's sitting on us. And you want to get rid of that. So at least wash your body and your hair, once a day. I mean, these are just basic things we can do. So we talked about that. Some of the things, some of the negative things of this, obviously, is of the social isolation is, it's potential depression, especially in people who are lonely. And that is a problem. Maybe this will give you time to reconnect or find some relationships. There's an ongoing study from Harvard University. I think it's been going on for 70 or 80 years, where they've followed people who graduated from Harvard, and I think they've only done males. They really should probably include females too, to see, because male and females, they look at things differently. And then they look at some of the population in Boston who were not necessarily rich or so there were all kinds of financial stratus. And they follow them. They actually go to their homes, they interview them, they look, so it's a very detailed study over, 70, 80 years. And some of these people were up here, now they're down here, some were down here, went up. Some had drug addictions, some got divorced, some got remarried, some never got married. And what they found is the only consistent key to happiness with all of these people was having meaningful relationships, especially with a spouse. So if you have a meaningful relationship with somebody that you in the time of need that you can rely on them, that was the key to happiness. And the lonely people were the most miserable and unhappy and unhealthiest. So there's definitely something to having social interaction. So, keep that in mind. So, what's going to happen? I don't know. After this pandemic is over, do you think that we're going to be just scared forever? Cleaning everything, which is, as I've told you, if we over-sterilize or try to over-clean is actually not a good idea, because we need some exposure to bacteria and dust and this and that to keep our immune system healthy. Or are people just going to go nuts because they've been bottled up? I'm interested to see what your thought process is. I think maybe there would be a combination. There's a few people who are going to go one extreme, some people are going to go that extreme. But are we ever going to get to anything that was, like before? I don't know. It's a tough question. So look at what's happened to our planet. I mean, it's interesting to see when the human race, I mean, I've said that before, I think we're the worst virus on this planet and we're slowly killing it. But, there's a photo from the Strait of Bosphorus. The Strait of Bosphorus is a narrow piece of water between Istanbul, the Asian part on the east, and the European part of Istanbul. Which is the capital of Turkey. As you know, Turkey has a European side and an Asian side. And because of this coronavirus thing, people aren't going back and forth, and there were thousands of jellyfish. And this photographer took a photo of it because now the humans weren't around. And I'm sure you've seen photos of, dolphins coming into Venice or this and that. So, this is kind of a situation which we never may see again. And so hopefully we can learn something from it. But look at what's happened to the earth. I mean, when was the last time we had such a global effect? So much change in the world. And this is from a virus that's 120 nanometers in size. So, a lot of you know what a millimeter is. A millimeter is a millionth of a meter. A nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter. So this is a meter. You can see the size. Okay? Okay, so if I shrink, humans, so they're 1 nanometer in size, in that meter I can fit in, and we're faced, eye to eye, I can fit the entire population of the United States and Europe in that 1 meter. So, look at this little tiny thing and what is done to us. And it's not even alive. Viruses are, one of the definitions of a living organism is that they have to be able to replicate. Well, viruses replicate, but they need another living organism so they inject their DNA or RNA, and it's just a piece of it. And then that little piece uses the cell that's in there to help it reproduce and copy itself, and then it spits it out and the cell bursts. So it's kind of like half dead, half living. I like to think of it as the zombie. It's really like a zombie. And so, a lot of you who saw The Walking Dead and you were worried about the zombie apocalypse, here it is, I guess. And it may not be an apocalypse in terms of number of people dead, but it certainly is an apocalypse into what was done to the earth. So, what's the philosophical aspect of this? I don't know. All I know is, I've seen, we're all worried about death, obviously, and, you should be safe and like I said, live a safe and healthy life. That's always better than being reckless. But at the end of the day, I've seen a lot of weird things happen that I have no scientific explanation for. And I think we probably have a number. So when our number is up, our number is up. And I can give you an example, and you can look this up. This happened a year or two ago. There was a woman who lived in South Carolina. She turns 50. She goes to the beach with a bunch of her friends to celebrate her birthday. There's a sudden gush of wind. Dislodges a beach umbrella, and the sharp end of the umbrella goes into her chest, and she immediately dies. Now, the only good thing about this very sad story is that she didn't suffer, but I mean, if there are any statisticians out there, can you calculate for me what's the chance of that happening? I mean, that's, I don't know what to tell you. So, stay safe. Like I said, wash your hands before you touch your face. That's what everybody's talking about. That's the best thing we can do. Again, the CDC has not said anything about these aerosols causing infections. So, that's the best thing we can do. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. Just know that especially the cloth masks, all they're doing is if you cough or sneeze, or somebody sneezes at you, it is catching just the big droplets. But it's not as effective as surgical mask or N95, and even they are not 100% proof. And if you wear them after a few hours or a day, you have to replace them because the filter gets blocked. The other thing I forgot to talk to you about was this thing that they found coronavirus on the sole of the shoes, and everybody's freaking out on that. Well, first of all, that was done in hospital settings where there's a lot of, they're taking care of this patient, so it's not going to apply necessarily to me and you. But have you ever cultured the sole of your shoes even before the coronavirus? I mean, it's a cesspool. That's why you should not take your shoes and walk with them in your home. I mean, you got all kinds of stuff. All other shoes there, God knows where they have been. Then you got dead animals that used to be on that floor that are not there, but the bacteria is still there. Dogs pooping and peeing. I mean, of course, it's just not very good. It doesn't matter if it's coronavirus or not. So just leave your shoes at home. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. So, it's humbling. It's humbling that this tiny thing is causing so much havoc. I hope we kind of realize that we're very smart, but at the same time very fragile. And let's just make the best of it, and let's just be the best human being we can. I mean, that's all we can do. All right, take care, and I'll talk to you later. Thank you.